Welcome to episode number 43 of the First Responder Wellness Podcast. My name is Conrad Weaver, and I'm so grateful that you've joined us today. I hope you are doing well. I hope you are thriving. I hope you're doing everything you need to do to move your life in the direction you want to go, and that includes your mental health. Brandon Evans is a firefighter and an entrepreneur who found himself facing the weight of his profession and the struggles of life while grappling with suppressed trauma and a financial crisis. Then an incident during a house fire shook him to the core, leading to a profound realization of the urgent need for mental health support tailored for firefighters. So he set out to learn more about this, and he's here today to share some of the results of his research. He personally called and talked with more than 100 fire chiefs from around the world, which is amazing. And he did that to learn what they are doing in the area of mental health and wellness. And what he found is really astounding. So stay tuned for this profound and deep conversation. Hey, I hope you are enjoying listening or watching to this podcast and that you're getting something out of it. And I'd love to hear your comments or thoughts about what you're experiencing. And I've already heard from some of you, so thank you for reaching out. My mission is to bring you content that inspires you to develop a culture of wellness for yourself and for your team, because I believe that wellness is not optional. And if you enjoy the show, please subscribe. I promise to do everything I can to continue to bring you content that matters to you. And when you subscribe, invite your tribe to join in as well. Share the links and let's get more people listening so that we can have a greater impact on the world around us. Hey, thanks again for being here. And now here's my conversation with Brandon Evans. Well, Brandon, welcome to the First Responder Wellness Podcast. I'm glad we're able to connect today.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Thanks for being here. It was great meeting you a couple weeks ago, I guess now at FDIC. I'm excited to chat.
Really great to meet you and there at FDIC and just to learn more about what you are doing. But first, give us a little bit of the cliff notes of your backstory.
Sure. So I'm a firefighter. I've been a firefighter for 15 years or so. I was 11 years professional firefighter for a big metropolitan city. Couple years volunteer, spent a season doing wildfire. So heavily invested as a firefighter, love the job. Spent some time as an entrepreneur, like firefighters have part-time jobs. It's not uncommon. So I ran a CrossFit gym with my wife. We owned a gym, operated it. It was very young, and then COVID hit. So we went through this process of being closed. So I'm from Canada. So my gym was closed for almost 2 years. We weren't allowed to operate. Wow. off and on. We ended up losing that business, costed us hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it was really, it changed our lives completely, not just the gym, but just that time. In December of 2020, I was a part of a crew. We extracted a woman from a house fire. It was a homicide. She was beaten and burned to death. And so with the accumulation of traumas in my life, with this experience with the gym, having this external pressure, stresses, all of these things, I wasn't good. And so one day my wife looked at me and told me I needed to get some help. And she was right. I was just acting in ways that weren't healthy. I was a shitty parent. I was doing really shitty things to my little kids. Like, they were young. My son was 4 years old. I'm swearing and screaming in his face for my own issues that have nothing to do with him, And so during that process, I kind of for me, it was getting back on the wagon of like remembering to implement these processes of when I'm stressed and when I'm struggling. So, COVID was a unique time. And then going through that process that led me to, finally making the decision to close the gym because this place wasn't serving me anymore. From a financial perspective, it was completely destroyed. So why would we sink any more money into it? And then it opened space for me. So I kind of looked at my journey as a firefighter. I never went off on a leave. The fire hall was a very safe place for me to go. I wanted to go there. It was actually provided a lot of downtime for me, and it gave me a bit of a break, I found. And I have an amazing crew. The guys were great. And so one thing leads to the next, and I come up with this idea to start this organization called Fire to Light. When I looked at what was provided for me, what I knew was provided for me when I was going through this trauma in my life, I didn't turn to anything that my department offered me. It wasn't that it wasn't good or sufficient. There was just some other tools that I started to use. I started speaking with a psychiatrist. I started doing breath work. Getting back into breath work was something I've been practicing for the last 10 years. Got back into doing meditations, focused on the physical side and exercising and eating well and working and all those kinds of things. A lot of other modalities that I started to learn to practice. And
so I want to jump in really quickly, and I'm sorry for interrupting, but I want to kind of, a lot of my listeners here are from the U.S. We have a good bit of Canadian listeners as well, but I have not had very many Canadians on my program, and so I want to know a little bit about what you guys in your training, coming up through the ranks. Did you have any kind of mental health training?
We do have mental health training that we do. These are typically classroom setting where we go into the classroom. For me in my career, that happened twice. It happened twice, once in recruit class and then once about, I don't know what it was, the 5 or 7 year mark in our career. So there's some programs that run through Canada, and this is how they work. They're like one-off programs. Our like peer support teams and CISM teams become trained in those modalities, so they can provide excess training for the department. However, we go and we sit in the classroom. That happens once or twice. There's a lot of people that are doing a lot of great work, doing a lot of amazing things, but in terms of the delivery of mental health training, that's what we get. And so that's what I'd received. I'd been in this health space for quite some time in my life, just as an entrepreneur, as a person, just from past experiences. So it was something I was actively doing. I was actively meditating in the fire hall since I started. Just it was a part of my routine when I came in the morning. So we do mental health training in Canada. We'll talk about this a little bit later on. This led me to starting Fire to Light. It led me to conducting an international research study on the current state of mental health within the fire service. And so yeah, there's a lot of congruency all over the world in the fire service in terms of how we train, and the pockets that are excelling, if you will, well, they're just pockets all over the world. Like there's some in the States, there's some in the UK, there's some in Canada, there's some in Africa. They're everywhere. It's not like one country is doing leaps and bounds above everybody else. Some countries are positioned a lot differently than others. There's a lot of places I didn't interview that I don't know of. But it's the majority, it's like this, what's the saying? The same, but different. Most of what we do is very similar. And there's differences, whether it's in our training, whether it's cultural differences, just little things that separate and make us different. So.
What did you, back when you were kind of working on developing this study, what was your focus? What was the main thing you were trying to discover or learn?
I want to help. I'm trying to focus on prevention and preventing firefighters from killing themselves and helping to prevent firefighters from going off on PTSD leaves and never returning back to work.
So I'm assuming you had experiences with those situations.
Yep. Yep. And similar ones, like, there was an overdose on our department that was basically not talked about at all. So, I've been to a lot of firefighter funerals. I think a lot of firefighters have. We know a lot of firefighters, know of firefighters, and very early mentor of mine was an instructor I had in fire college. So this was someone who I really looked up to, especially as I was getting into the fire service and learning all of these things. and he took his own life a couple of years ago, and not a very pretty situation. And it was a shock, I think, to everybody, because I don't know what that person looks like. I mean, it's him. He did it. The challenges that we all face internally are great. And, being a firefighter, working closely and intimately with people, we live in this firehouse. It's our home away from home. We know who's not well, or at least we think we know who's not well. And we know the conversations that we have or the conversations that we don't have. What I started noticing, as I started to practice different things like breath work or neurolinguistic programming, I'd go in and see these therapists, and we'd do these sessions, and I come back to work like, oh my God, guys, listen to this stuff. I was feeling this way. And then, for me, there was this burnt body laying on a driveway, and then someone's skin that was covering my entire body as we worked to pull them out of the house. It really messed me up. And through this process of NLP, that turned into a wreath of roses and a pair of jeans, not a burnt body. And it was a weird process. I didn't understand much about it beforehand. I knew someone who was practicing it. And so I went through the therapy and did the process. And when I thought about it afterwards, I thought about the scene. And the first thing that popped in my mind was a wreath of roses and a pair of jeans. I was like, oh my God, that thing worked. It was only a 20-minute session that we did. And so what that did was it made me smile. And so it started this new process of rewiring my brain, literally, and it introduced new thoughts, new feelings, and new emotions to this trauma that was dragging me down, that was holding me in a very dark place. And so it completely flipped the switch for me. And then, therapy just kind of builds on and builds on and builds on and builds on. And for me, it just went in a positive direction.
So in your work with the research, how did you go about that? And you tell us what you can, about that research.
Yeah. So I started creating this mental fitness program for firefighters. And originally it was heavily based on my own experience. And then I said, I need to know more about this. So I thought I would interview, I don't know, a couple of chiefs, maybe 20 if I got lucky, in the greater Toronto area where I'm from in Canada. And I ended up interviewing 104 chiefs from 5 different continents who represent over 1.3 million firefighters globally. I sat down with Dr. Lori Moore Merrill, United States Fire Administrator. She got a hold of my research, and we had an incredible conversation. We learned a lot. It was amazing initially how well received this process was. I would just randomly interview chiefs. I didn't even know. I never went to university. I've never done any kind of research really. And so I was just kind of shooting in the dark. And then the snowball effect started happening where chiefs started recommending me to other chiefs. What did we learn? We learned that 3 of the major challenges the fire service faces in mental health are a lack of trust, a lack of understanding and acceptance of mental health, a lack of humanity. These are 3 major issues that exist. We learned that there is a lot of congruency in the fire service. We all learn off each other, though there are differences in terms of maybe the type of call we have to go to. Most of those calls involve trauma in some capacity. You know what I mean? Our thoughts can go towards whether somebody was shot versus somebody who died in a car accident, whether you're doing CPR on someone who had a heart attack or whatever it might be. They're all traumatic events, right? We learned that the average first responder will experience between 300 to 600 traumatic events in their career. When you compare that to the average person in the general population, they only experience between 3 to 4 traumatic events in their lifetime. So, we know it, but now we put the numbers towards and say, wow, those are big numbers. So if I go back to training, we talked about training earlier, over 86% of fire departments that we interviewed train in mental health 1 to 2 times in a firefighter's career. That's it. So when we compare that to how
now, this
often
is global, this is from all the ones that you
this is a global perspective from all the ones that we spoke with. So this isn't true for everybody. Only 2% of departments we interviewed trained on a monthly basis in terms of mental health, and 7% trained annually in mental health. So if we look at how often you train on pumping on your fire truck, pulling hose off, learning how to use the tools, putting your CBA on, whatever it might be, it's exponentially more than what we do. When we started to look at stigma is a thing. We all know this. We know this word. It comes up every single time you talk about mental health. So we kind of dove into that because it was so prevalent. It was every single chief had mentioned that stigma still exists. Over 90% of the chiefs and leaders we interviewed were men. Okay. That's congruent to international industry, right? There's over 90% of firefighters around the world are still men. Okay. So this has nothing to do, but we're not excluding women in any capacity. We're just kind of looking at how did we get to where we are in terms of mental health? Like, what are the factors to that? So in this industry, it's primarily been only men. So one of the last questions that we asked chiefs was around firefighter PTSD and firefighter suicide and their experience with that. In those conversations, some of them got really vulnerable, and there's this trust piece between firefighters, myself and them, right? We both wear the boots and we're open to share these stories, and it came up on multiple occasions of these chiefs that have never seen their fathers cry, not knowing how to process their emotions. And so we looked into this piece, like, as men and the ancestry of men in a predominantly male industry, what have we been taught or shown how to express our emotions, how to deal with our emotions? How do we know how to do this? We've seen suppression of it, that's for sure. But what have we actually been shown through the men of our past, through the people we're around, to get in touch with and in tune with those vulnerabilities and the emotional side, the psychological side of this job? And so, alcoholism is very prevalent in our industry, right? It's a tool that we use to suppress emotions that we don't know how to deal with. So it's no fault of anybody's. However, we looked at that to say, why are we where we are? How are we here? Why are we in the midst of burnout? I believe from my research that we are in the midst of burnout as first responders, but mine was solely on the fire service. So in the fire service, we're in burnout. We're seeing an increase in firefighters going on leave. We're seeing the majority of the reason for that switching to psychological injury versus musculoskeletal injury for the reason firefighters are going off on leave. So this is a big thing. We're seeing this shift. And when we ask why that's happening, we're seeing, there's all kinds of factors. You can't pinpoint one specific reason as to why it's happening. There's cultural shifts. And so there's a lot of conversation, like, what does this mean? The generational gaps. Are we weaker than what we used to be from a mental capacity? Perhaps, or maybe we're stronger. Maybe we're more able. Maybe the younger generations are more willing and more able to say, I need some time. And so where does that grit and resilience come in? We use these words often, right? Especially resiliency. What can we learn from both generations, right? Because those who came before us, I think there's an awful lot that we can learn. They laid a platform, and the work ethic, the ability to get in there and get things done. Like, we need that. You need it in emergency response. We don't have time to I don't know what the right word is. We don't have time to go and maul in a corner. Oh, it's too bad. It sucks, but do the job. This is why we're here. We need to do the job. And, right, it's not a but, it's an and we need to learn how to process this stuff in a healthy manner so we stop killing ourselves. Which I don't. It'd
be interesting to know. Is this something that maybe a metric that you looked at as what's the average age of a firefighter suicide?
Yeah, I don't know. We didn't dive into that too long, or too deeply. That wasn't the main focus. Sure. We're just kind of looking at general state.
Because I thought that maybe that would kind of give an indication as to a generational thing. Are people that are they older or are they younger? It'd kind of be interesting to look at that.
Yeah. So again, I don't know all the numbers, wasn't my focus of research.
Sure.
However, what I did come across was that the fastest growing rate of suicide in the United States is with teens between 13 and 17 years old.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a good stat.
Right.
So it doesn't matter what you are. A proportion of those are going to become first responders.
Right.
So this just speaks to this younger generation and struggling psychologically, and then asking the question, well, why? Why is that happening? What we also know that, so in the past, I don't know what the switch is or when it was. This is just through, I read a lot of research papers as I was doing this research, right? And typically, when a firefighter goes off on leave, it'll happen somewhere between that 15 to 25 year mark for a psychological injury. We're seeing that happen a lot sooner now, a lot sooner. Like I just spoke with a department yesterday, and like now today, their department, 2/3 of their department is been on for less than 5 years.
Wow.
So we're seeing a massive generational shift, right, with the ages of people who are being there. And then there's not even a gap in between, you know what I mean? From the old firefighters to the new firefighters. And so there's probably, in a sense, I'm just thinking of this now, what's that learning curve, that piece that we're missing, having all these firefighters retire, right? These baby boomers are retiring. And then this new wave is coming in, and how are we filling that gap? Because both need to learn from each other. It isn't just teach the new firefighters, right? And what's the saying? You can't teach an old dog new tricks. So that's not good either. We need to learn from each other. And so, yeah, I would be interested to know what more specific numbers around that are when it comes to suicide, and as well as firefighters going off on leave. Like if we can pinpoint those segments. There was a study that was coming out from the UK, and they were looking at stress points throughout a firefighter's career, from being hired to going through promotional processes. Like they've identified, I think, 30 some odd major stress points. So the report hasn't been released to my knowledge. I spoke with the individual who was putting the report out. And so it was I was very interested to see some further information on that.
So you mentioned earlier about three things: trust, mental health, and humanity. So trust, is that trust in leadership, trust in the system? What's that mean?
It kind of covers it all. So there's very much still a them versus us attitude when it comes to administration, firefighters, unions. I mean, listen, our job is super complex, right? The layers of government, it's different for each country. So you have state, you have federal, you have municipal, right? You have unions, you have administration, you have firefighters. There's a lot of pieces to that pie. And, the more layers you add on, the more difficult it is to appease everybody. So, this is an area of trust, or a lack of trust. We saw some incredible things happen in one department. They took all the ranking symbols away because they did a cultural review. The review came back that the hierarchy was causing intimidation, and that was actually preventing firefighters from speaking up and going to get the help that they wanted or needed to get, because they didn't feel safe talking to administrative staff. And once they removed the visual aspect of that, like, things changed, and that open door policy actually became an open door policy. Trust came around of a lack of educated practitioners. So we are seeing wait times through departments' EAP systems that are somewhere between 9 to 12 months. Wow. That means that when I put my hand up, I call my EAP system, I say, I need help. They say, cool, we can get you a psychologist. It's just going to take you 9 months because they're backlogged.
You'd be dead by then.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So again, that's not happening everywhere. Some departments have amazing EAP systems and they get people in the door right away. There's a lot of chiefs openly shared stories with me of them and firefighters they know that have gone to see a therapist, and the therapist wasn't trained in what we do. And the therapist either left the room because they were so unease with the conversation that happened to what they were being told, or they're trying to get the firefighter to explain more about their job when the firefighter is just saying, I need some help. Can someone just listen to me? And, news spreads fast. in the fire service, right? Within your own department, within the service at large. And so when that stuff comes up, it's like, well, I don't know, Sarah went to go see a psychologist and had a horrible experience. Like, how can you trust these people?
Yeah.
What we also didn't see, though, was departments that were providing training to their firefighters to teach them how to look for educated practitioners, how to trust and find somebody that you can talk to, and doing that earlier than later. So that was another perspective. Like, that's also true. And what are we doing? It's one thing to just say that they don't exist and we don't do anything, but how are we showing up for our firefighters and for their health? So yeah, the trust came, it just happens in a lot of areas, we know we trust each other, and we're not trained professionals when it comes to mental health. Like we can put fires out. We're really good at that. We're amazing at that. We can share war stories. That's really good. What we don't share is our vulnerabilities, is our emotions, is our lack of awareness around our emotions. I don't know why I'm feeling this way. I don't know why I'm thinking this way. Can somebody help? That rarely happens. It's growing. It's starting to.
Do you think it's perhaps because that's a soft skill, or you appear to be soft if you start sharing your feelings?
Yeah, of course. It speaks to that toxic masculinity piece. I'm not downplaying masculinity. I think it's an amazing thing. We are an industry full of a lot of alpha males. And listen, it's twofold. I don't think firefighters go around thinking, I'm the shit. I'm a firefighter. I'm a hero. It's not what we do. Yeah. However, you are a hero. The public persona on you is that you are a hero. And so we embody that. That identity is placed upon us without even knowing. And we need confidence to do our job. You need to be confident to run into a burning building. Sure. You need that, right? And so, like I spoke to earlier, this perception of men and their emotions over time, this is not a tool that we have been shown or taught how to use. We don't know how to be vulnerable. We've been taught that it is a weakness. That's why you just say, suck it up, just do it. Are you good? Well, you're going to see a lot more of this shit. So you better get good at it. You better pack it up. Like, you better get good at it. I don't think it's that any other generation was tougher than the next. My dad shares stories of his grandfather who was in the First World War. And a couple of times a year, he would lock himself in the attic with as many bottles of whiskey as he could. And he'd stay up there for a week and get absolutely plastered. That was how he dealt with the traumas that he had to deal with in a war. And that's not uncommon. It's not uncommon. And so I really believe that we, as firefighters, as men, not all firefighters, not excluding women here, but the male portion of this job, we've not been taught how to tap into our emotions. We haven't seen it. Our fathers typically haven't shown us how to do that. Our expectations have been different. And I believe that that's kind of shifting and changing. And so, how do we take the best of both of those worlds and make really strong, tough, resilient, gritty firefighters who can dive in, who can do the work, who are not afraid to run in when everybody else comes out, who understand that their life is on the line and they're willing to go in and do that thing. And they care enough about their health, physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, to take the preventative steps to understand that this goes along with it all. And how can we deal with that and manage it in a healthy manner?
So how can you teach vulnerability?
So one of the most powerful tools that we saw was storytelling, right? It's storytelling. When the bison get to the edge of the cliff, they all stop. And then when one of them jumps over, maybe another one will go, maybe another one will go. And then another one goes. We do the same thing, What I noticed when I was going through my own therapy, it was that I would come back to the hall and I would share my experiences with my firefighters. I was in a bit of a leadership position, so I wasn't like, if I was a rookie, I probably wouldn't have done that. But what I noticed was that they kind of listened. They all listened. And then in the years afterwards, not the days, but the years afterwards, I know, so, a couple individuals on my crew, I know one of them went through a real hard time right when he got on. Some, issues at home, as well as really, really horrible calls within his first couple of years as a firefighter. And just before I left, so I retired in October, but just before I left, we'd be in the gym working out together, and I'd stumble back in to pick something up, and there he is meditating in the gym floor. Not something he was doing 3 years prior. And so this, monkey see, monkey do. We watch each other. So if we are open to share, if you can find any strength and courage to share some of those vulnerabilities and the things that we do, whether it's physical fitness in relation to our mental health, whether it's going to see a therapist, people listen and we pick up and we become curious. When someone tells us something that we're unfamiliar with, we become curious. We may get defensive. So we need to ask ourselves why we're so defensive when that comes up. But if we can be curious about this information, then we start to practice things. We start to try things. What is that meditation someone's always talking about? I can't sit still in a room. Well, not if you never tried, right? I could never ride a bike before I tried to ride a bike. And then I fell off a bunch of times, and I fell off a bunch more, and I thought I got it, and I fell off again. And eventually you figure it out. And so to answer your question, we can learn through sharing our stories. We can find courage through listening to other stories. We can find our own courage through sharing our own stories. And we need to be open and willing to try. If something isn't working, then we need to try something different, right? Alcohol and drugs aren't the answer. Don't care how you think they make you feel. They are not the answer. They only pull you down. And so to find some healthy modalities that we can start practicing, then it helps. And it's really fucking hard.
And how important is it for that to begin with leadership?
I think it's an interesting question. I honestly, I really believe that there are so many leaders in this industry, from the top of the chief all the way down to the rookie. We find leadership as humans in society, in humanity, not necessarily with the president or whoever's the leader or the CEO or the celebrity. Sometimes, right? Sometimes. Also, our heroes are our parents. They're our friends. We watch a friend do something that we wish we could do. We say, wow, we become inspired by that. And so I think real leadership comes from courage. It doesn't matter what your position you're in, what stripes you're in. The difference is how we think about our own position. If we don't value our own truth, our own worth, because we don't have gold stripes on, then you're probably not going to be as great of a leader, maybe. I don't know. But if you value your own worth, we all see those firefighters around the kitchen table who stand up to the chief. You say, whoa, whatever. You're the chief, you're a district, you're a deputy, you're a platoon chief, and they come in and say something inappropriate that shouldn't be said, or you disagree with them. Some people just, I better not say anything. That's the chief. Or you can have a conversation. And so I don't think it's about top down. I don't think it's about bottom up. I think it's about all of us, every single one of us, from the chief all the way to the rookie, to be able to take a look inward and find something within ourselves. Why aren't we speaking up when we know we should? Right? I think we've all gone through that as a rookie because we're taught, keep your mouth shut and your ears open. And there's value to that. 100%, there's a lot of value to that. And if you know something is wrong, then it's worth talking up. Maybe you should wait a few minutes. Maybe you should have a conversation afterwards. But we can lead. Just because some senior firefighter comes in and says, get up off your ass. What are you doing meditating in the gym? That's not what this is for. What are you, some kind of pussy? Doesn't mean it's true. And so when you continue to do those things, and you continue to go against the grain, people start to question it. They say, oh, wow, why? We never thought we were going to drive cars everywhere. Those can't be better than horseback. Look at those things. They're going to break down this, that, and the other. And now what? we don't ride horses too much anymore, right? That's not our main avenue of transportation. Yeah. So I don't think leadership just comes from the top down. I think that in our industry, specifically in relation to the research that I just did in relation to mental health training, that we need more leadership. We only saw 2% of departments that have specific mental health training for their administrative staff. Only 2%. 2024 is the inaugural year, the first year that the IAFC, International Association of Fire Chiefs, is implementing their own peer support structure. Wow. We've had it for over 30 years as firefighters. So this speaks to that piece of trust in them versus us, right? We didn't think about it for a long time because the chief sits behind a desk for the most part. They're in a different role. However, they still have stresses. They still go to the calls. These guys have always been like therapists. They're always talking to firefighters, whether they think they're open or not, or how much firefighters used to talk versus how much we're talking now. They're always dealing with people. That's not an easy place to be.
It's interesting. A few weeks ago, I was talking to a friend of mine who does training with a lot of in law enforcement, and he was in a state. I won't say which state, but he was in a state where they had the Association of Police Chiefs coming together, and he did training for all these police chiefs from across the state. And he said the first thing he always does is he gives them a PTSD assessment. And he's a psychologist. And so he gives us this assessment. And at that particular meeting, I think it was 80% of the police chiefs at that meeting had high levels of PTSD scores. Over 80%.
Sure. Yeah. I'm not surprised. I think, this is stigma, right? When we talk about PTSD, like the language that we have around mental health has a very negative connotation to it. Like I remember hearing these words as a kid, watching shows on TV and like, oh, you got mental issues. That means you're going to a psych ward somewhere. That's what that means. Right. Yeah. Just because someone was bipolar, for example, oh, you better go to the psych ward. What are you talking about? And so we've evolved so much since then.
I want to jump into the other two items there. You had trust, mental health, and humanity. And remind me again what those three things meant.
Those are the three major challenges that we are facing in the fire service: a lack of trust, a lack of understanding and acceptance of mental health, and humanity, or the lack of humanity.
Okay. Let's dive into that humanity piece. What did you mean by a lack of humanity?
Yeah, I think it comes in a lot of different areas. I think it speaks to, I think it's a thread that's woven throughout the entire report, that's woven throughout mental health and the state of mental health where we're at in the fire service. So if we look at COVID for a moment as a first responder, as a firefighter, to give some context, I would come back in off of a 7-day stretch being off. That was part of our schedule, right? 24-hour shifts. And there'd be 15, 20, 30 new policies sitting on the desk, most of which made absolutely no sense at all. I mean, it was COVID, it was a pandemic. No one knew what they were doing or what was happening. This kind of like downplayed the person and upplayed the uniform. And, I don't know, as a leader, how do you deal with government policies, mandates, all these things? If we look at policies and procedures, and any chief or firefighter can look at these things, there are some that serve the person and the human, and there's others that serve the firefighter. So a quote that was stated to me in my research on mental health was that we minimize trauma in the fire service because we need firefighters to do their job. And wow. In a sense of that, it's true, right? I need you to go in, you know, and you don't even have to ask us. You just look at 9/11. They had to try and pull these guys away after being there for days and weeks. Like, you don't even have to.
You can't roll up to a scene and be like, oh, I don't want to see that, and go away. You have to be professional, right?
But on the backside of that, in the aftermath of it, as we react to it, we say, whoa, and this is part of what we're experiencing now with the increase of firefighters going on leave. I'm not saying this is a bad thing. Mm-hmm. I think it's equal parts as pros and cons to it, right? How do we backfill these positions? But most importantly, how do we help these people? How do we treat them? And how do we get them back to work in a safe, sufficient manner? And not just, leave them to the wolves, if you will. And so this is where that humanity piece comes in. It's how are we looking at all of these? How are we treating these? How are we dealing with the aftermath of what we know happens in this job? We know that trauma is a part of the job. We know that people get diagnosed with PTSD. We know firefighter suicide exists at double the rate for firefighters than that of the general population. And how do we treat people like people? Behind the hero, there's a person. And, we had to deal with that dead child just as much as everybody else did, even if it wasn't ours. But that impacts us, whether we know it or not. We live in an environment where there's a lot of uncommon commonalities, right? With all this trauma. And like anybody, we want to be felt and treated like a human, not like a number. And some departments do that really well, and other ones have kind of lost that in the process. And so there's a group of chiefs through the interviews that the main focus becomes budget, finances, and when they're seeing increases of firefighters going on law, it's like, well, how do we find those who are cheating the system, that are the reason for these increase of numbers, because you're just calling in sick on Saturday because it's a sunny day and maybe you don't actually need to be off. There's also another group of chiefs who said, I don't care why you're off. I just want to help you. And maybe that means that we need to find a new job for you because this job isn't serving you anymore. Maybe that's the case. And maybe there's other things, they're off, but has nothing to do with the job. It only has to do with they're going through a divorce, so they're a hard time at home. Yeah, but when you break your leg at the fire hall, you got to bring that home, right? Same for any injury. And so they do this. They are all connected. Our lives are intrinsically connected. We are firefighters. We do say yes to this job. And we are human beings, and we need to be treated like human beings. Like the title of my report is Heroes Are Also Human. We aren't these unique people. We go to unique experiences because of the nature of our job, and we're human just like everybody else. And so it's showcased in a lot of different areas, where we put too much focus on everything else. We say there's not enough money. Okay. I have an example of a fire department who in a single year overspent their overtime budget by 1,500%.
Wow.
And you're telling me there's no money to pump into mental health initiatives. I call bullshit.
Yeah.
We find the money when we think we need it for things.
Well, so just like anything, you see, people spend money on what they find important. I can see someone living in a trailer, not that there's anything wrong with living in a trailer, but yet they have a jacuzzi out front. They're spending money on what they want to spend money on.
That's right. So it'll go to where our priorities lie. And so we see amazing examples of fire departments that put their money where their mouth is and where their hearts are. That's what I should say. They put their money where their hearts are, and their thoughts and their emotions and their feelings and their initiatives. Not all these initiatives cost money. It's about how do we think outside the box? How can we act and think differently? And how can we flip the switch and put that money up front versus spend it on the back end? And that transition takes time. But what we found is it's very doable. We've seen departments who have done it. So
you have an example of a department that was doing things that way? We didn't have it upside down?
Yeah. South Metro, Colorado. They went through a catastrophic injury. They've given me permission to write the case study in the report. So I believe I'm okay to speak to it a little bit here. It's all in good light. Went through a catastrophic injury. They put the brakes on and said, why did this injury happen? And they looked into it. They sat in their own humility. It's like we expected them to all do a physical test. Someone failed at that physical test in a catastrophic injury. Luckily, that firefighter didn't die. They were able to bring them back. but they won't ride the trucks again. And they took steps to fix the problem that they had. The expectation was that you do this, but there was zero training or preparation beforehand to put them through that test. And so they used to spend a lot of money on the back end, overtime, insurance payouts, backfilling. That same amount of money, they believe, is now spent on the front end with an in-house clinic, a staff led by an MD, athletic therapist, neurofeedback specialist. I believe they're bringing in a mental performance coach, an ex-Marine. So they have a huge staff, I think 12 to 15 people that's all in-house, that all wears the same uniforms. So they put that money up front. So when it's a physical injury, they get rehabilitated on modified duties at the fire hall 4 days a week.
Wow.
Not in their state's medical system that God knows what that looks like. These issues are everywhere in every country around the world. Their public systems are just backlogged like crazy, right? And so they took the power into their own hands, and they made a radical decision. They had support, right? They had supportive counsel to do these things. They had supportive leadership, which was massively valuable. However, they stood up for themselves. They stood up for their firefighters. They recognized that there was fault. Shouldn't say fault. They recognized that things weren't working and that they actually weren't preparing their firefighters. They weren't helping them. And so they flipped that switch, because where's a firefighter most valuable? At the fire hall.
Yeah, right.
At the fire hall, right? That's where our tax dollars go. That's where they're most valuable. If you need some time to get better, let's provide that time. And let's put a heavy, heavy emphasis on making sure that you're supported, that you're getting help, that you're taking the steps so that we can get you back to work. That's it. So it just comes down to caring. It comes down to putting your heart first, not the wallet or the bank account. There are people that cheat the system. We live in a society. You're going to get people of all walks of life. Sure. So that's cool. But where do you want to focus on? You're going to focus on that? Or are you going to focus on people that need your help?
I heard a podcast recently, and I forget who it was. I think it was the Mel Robbins podcast, and she had an expert on who studied leadership and studied jobs and work. And actually, it may not have been that. It may have been someone else. But anyway, they were talking about how our society, we have so many people who hate their jobs. And that ends up being the people who, yell at the kids and kick the dog and do all the things at home because all the stuff that's happening. And you can trace that back to the student who's in the middle school. He's acting out because dad's hates his job and dad's taking it out on the family. And it all comes back to there's a toxic environment at work. Yeah. And they're not supported. He doesn't feel supported at work. Right. And so when you don't feel supported, you begin to hate your job and you hate coming to that place.
There's a fascinating study that just came out of New Zealand. New Zealand Fire did a cultural review, and they looked at this what they call it, these organizational stresses and how supported individuals feel at work. And it had more to do with if you were happier and healthier, it was because you were supported at work and you felt like you were a part of a team. That's what it came down to, the organizational structure, not the trauma and the other stuff. It was that. If you feel like you're part of the team, if you feel like you're included, if they make you feel like a human, then you'll be better off. And when you're not, then you can move on from that. That's an interesting piece, people unhappy with their jobs. It's part of the way society has been for the last, 100 years, industrial revolution. We need people to work in factories. So let's create all these structures to get people working in factories. And then a lot of us just live our parents' dream. Oh, my dad thought it would be, I wanted me to be a doctor. Gives a shit what your dad wanted you to do. What do you want to do? And we are just now, I think, coming to this place where we are being able to be courageous enough to take those steps because they seem impossible. They seem challenging. So yeah, it's a factor. And then you get into first responders, and a lot of them love their jobs, and they're really, really hard. And a lot of people, I believe, we don't recognize when we are experiencing trauma and how it comes about. We easily put excuses on everything. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't matter what it is. And so sometimes it's hard to recognize. It's hard to articulate the thoughts and images that roll through your head or understand why they pop up when you're just trying to eat dinner with your family and all you can see is a burnt person laying on your table. That's what happened to me. You know why they're there, but you don't know how to shake it. You can't change it. You can't move it. You can't go back to sleep in the middle of the night. The insomnia takes over and there's all kinds of factors for it. And if we're not shown how to manage that stuff, if we don't know how to talk about it, then we don't know how to talk about it. It's hard to take those steps. We're supposed to be this idea of a firefighter, of a human, of a person. I'm supposed to be this, white picket fence, have the nice job and all these things, but I'm not happy. Yeah, because it doesn't matter. You got to do what you want to do. Your heart guides you in a direction. And if we're not in a position, if we haven't been taught or shown how to understand that language, then it becomes really difficult. And we spend most of our time resisting, and we resist change. And that usually doesn't make us happy. And so if we can learn to surrender to those things and move forward, it doesn't mean it's going to be easy. I think this is like, the expectation that life should be easy is actually making things much more difficult on a psychological plane than we realize. And life ain't about being easy. It's about moving through.
Yeah.
Right.
And you have to do what you have to do to get through.
Easy moments come. Hard moments come. Most of them we can't predict. And, the emotions are there. You're going to be angry at times. Like, someone kicks you, it's going to hurt. Right?
Yeah.
You have a choice whether you're going to hit them back or whether you're just going to accept it and like, wow, like that person's really hurting. I hope they're okay. Like, my leg hurts, but I guess I'll be okay.
And I've said before that I've not learned much on the easy days.
No, you don't. Yeah. They're easy because you went through the hard days.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I have a couple questions. One, with the South Metro group, it'd be interesting to see what the results were, a few years into that program and how they perhaps have saved money in overtime, how many people are doing overtime now, or what the results were of their investment on the front end.
Yeah. From what I can't speak fully to it. But from what I understand, from what I learned from interviewing them, whenever that was, a year ago, 8 months ago, they have had a drastic reduction in overtime and insurance payouts. Most people become funneled through their own internal system. They don't have to, but they can. And it seems to be working. They have firefighters from neighboring departments knocking on their door, wanting to come work for them. So
I've heard the same thing from
that alone speaks volumes.
From an agency in Texas who did something similar, and they have people lining up at the door waiting to work for them.
Yeah, they care. But when people care, they say, okay, I want to go work for that organization. And honestly, like, it has nothing to do with money.
Yeah.
Right. It's just like, I don't know what they pay their firefighters versus somewhere else, but they're supported. At least that's the persona. And so they're attracting firefighters from all over the place.
So with all your research and the project there, what's next for that? And where do you hope to go with that?
Yeah. So I want to share the research with the world, and I want to help as many firefighters as possible. So along with the research, we took that information, we created a mental fitness program for firefighters. So we're trying to get as upstream as possible and work on preparing firefighters for the psychological side of our job in an effort to help them become more curious about who they are, so they can start asking new questions about how they act, how they respond, their emotions in relation to the job that we do, in an effort to help them put their hand up sooner to ask for help, so that we have less firefighters going through catastrophic injury, finding themselves at the bottom of the waterfall. Or when you are at the bottom of the waterfall, you have a life jacket and you have a toolbox and you have tools with you that can help you get out of the waterfall. And the effort is to prevent firefighters killing themselves. That's what we're trying to do.
Awesome. And so, so tell me, how can people get in touch with you? How can they connect with you, and how can
Yep.
they learn more about this research?
Yeah, of course. So Instagram is great. Fire_firefighters. Firetolight.org is our website. You can hit us up there. My email is brandon@fire2light.org. You can send me a personal email. We'd love to get in touch with you. Right now, we are working to roll this program out with fire departments. So we put entire departments on it. We don't yet have it for individuals to just kind of jump on. But if you are a firefighter and you are interested, just reach out and we can have a deeper conversation and see where that goes. So between implementing the program itself, and then we learned that storytelling was such a powerful piece in seeing improvement in the mental health of firefighters. So that's part of my journey as well, is getting on stages. I was just at FDIC where we met. I'm speaking at FRI, which is the Fire Rescue International, the IFC Fire Chiefs Conference in Dallas. So I'll be there as well. And just starting to make new connections and getting on stages, sharing my story, sharing my research, and implementing this program to try to help as many firefighters as we can on an international scale.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you this personal question. What do you do on a daily, besides moving to a really nice tropical climate, to take care of your own mental health?
Yeah. So what I want to share here is I do a lot of things. And, you know, I don't do every single thing every single day. That's not how it works. I like to look in bigger chunks. You know, when I look at a week, when I look at a month, when I look at a year, when I look at 5 years, I'm like, man, I'm crushing it, you know? Right now, I'm in a very intense place. I've just booked over 50, close to 60 calls in the next 2 weeks. So I don't have a lot of time between podcasts, calls with all these chiefs from all over the world. And so I'm in this segment now where I got to get my ass in gear and do a lot of work. And I know after that, there's going to be a moment of pause or moments of pause. And so I move my body every day, every single day. I broke my foot recently, so that looked like 100 push-ups a day. That was it. It might look like being in the pool with my kids, getting out and doing 20 sit-ups and doing like 5 sets of that. Simple. It might look like walking 200 meters to the end of my road to put my garbage out. That might be it. I'm spending a lot of time in front of the screen right now. I eat healthy. That means very little crap comes in my house. It needs to be real food. I have a very incredible relationship with my wife. And so we talk often. We talk about our stressors. We take downtime. I get in the water at least 3 days a week to surf. That's a non-negotiable for me. I got to play the tides a little bit because of where we live, but I get in the water. On the weekends, we spend them in a river or on a beach. That's just because of where we live. The point there, it doesn't matter where you live. It's about getting in nature. We get out in nature. When I have a couple minutes during the day, I step outside and I put my feet in the grass. It may seem like a silly thing, but it helps to ground me. It again connects me to nature and just adds like a shift in my environment. You know, I'm spending a lot of time right now in front of a screen, so I need I need to shift things around a little bit. So something I'll share with you, I don't know what you want to call it, whether it's like a affirmation or prayers. It's my internal dialogue is something that I've worked on for the last 15 years. And so there are these little mantras that I'll say to myself, whether it's like, I love myself, right? Whether I'm praising my children after a hard day with having young kids, when the opposite should probably be happening, you know, not probably, but when I lay in bed, these mantras go through my head. When I'm stressed, this mantra goes through my head. Super simple stuff like, I love myself. I am loved. I love and forgive myself. I love and forgive myself. I've been practicing these things for a long time. And so now it's just like muscle memory, this repetition, it comes up. You can see my screen. I do this a lot. This comes from a modality called EFT, which is emotional freedom technique. and it's about tapping on different like energy meridians in your body. This stuff is incredible. It resets your nervous system. And when I'm stressed driving the car, I just start tapping in my collarbone. I'm saying a lot of different things. I'm just trying to give some variety, right? Breath work is a thing that, like meditation, completely changed my life. Learning to get in touch with our breath. So as firefighters, like, we do breath work. We're trained to do breath work. You have to conserve your air when you put your SCBA on. It is a fucking non-negotiable. The worse you are, the less life you have when you're in that building, especially if you should get trapped in there. So we do it at home, and it helps to control. You can literally control your central nervous system, your vagus nerve, through your breath. So when I'm stressed, I can do a little breathwork technique to shift me from that sympathetic, that fight or flight nervous system to that rest and recovery, the parasympathetic. And the breath helps to calm that down. And so I don't go from like 100 to 0 in terms of my stress. But even if I go from a 10 to an 8, I'm winning. I'm winning. And so yeah, there's a lot of things that I do for myself during the day. I have put a priority on that. It's my number one priority. I don't leave it aside for everybody else. I've always been fairly physically fit. And so right now I'm sacrificing a little bit of the physical fitness. I'm still doing it, but I sacrifice a little bit more because this portion of my life needs to happen right now. And I know if I look at my past that in a month from now, that's going to flip the switch again. And I'm going to be back in full bore, working out 6 days a week. And so I'm not beating myself up that that's not happening right now. I'm accepting the place where I am, which is a huge thing when it comes to this kind of stuff, right? It's easy to beat ourselves up. If we can learn to just accept where we're at, then it really helps to get you through the day, to not beat yourself up. Oh my God, I didn't do my ice bath and my breath work and my meditation and my journaling and I didn't do the 100 things for my health I'm supposed to do. It's like, put the brakes on, man. Like, give yourself some love, give yourself some gratitude and some acceptance, and all these things are happening. So move forward. You know, I'm sitting up right now at a high stool so I can have a nice posture, and then I have a stand. So when I get off this call, I'm going to stand up because I've been sitting, and I'm going to work standing up for a couple of hours. So that's a big thing as well. If you're in a position where you're sitting, especially if you wear a white shirt and you're a chief and you're behind a computer for lots of the days, like, get a standing desk so you can stand up. Little things like that make a huge difference. So I'm about like little wins, man. What little wins can we give ourselves today that help move us forward?
Well, this has been a amazing conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
So if there is someone out there who doesn't do any of those things that you do, and they're in a place where they need to start doing something, what's one thing they can do to start?
I think that one thing that anybody can do is you can find a thing. Okay, so this water bottle. Here we go. Okay. And inside my own head, I can say, it sounds silly, right? I can say, I love this water bottle. Well, why? Well, because it holds my water. If I didn't have it, my water would be all over the place. It'd be very difficult to drink it. I love lamp, right? I love lamp. Well, why do you love lamp? Well, it provides light for me. Oh, okay. I love chair. Why? Well, it provides me a place to sit. I've yet to find any inanimate object that I can't attach that love to. So this was a practice that I do all the time. And it works on compounding interest. You put $1 in the bank every single day. By the end of the year, you know you're going to have $365. If you don't put any money in the bank, there's not going to be any money there. But interest compounds. So the more you put in, the better that investment's going to be in the long run. So this is a James Clear from Atomic Habits. 1% a day equates to 37% over an entire year. That is a massive. I'll take that bet all day long. I put in 1% today. You're going to give me 37% back tomorrow.
Yeah.
100%. End of the year, 100% I'll take that bet. And so if you aren't doing any of those things, there's two things here. One, You just don't know it. So you got to find it and give yourself some gratitude. And 2 is it starts up here. Start giving yourself some love. Give yourself some appreciation, because you are worth it, regardless of what's happened in your life, regardless of what you've done, what you think you may have done. It doesn't matter. We can move forward from whatever place you're in. I felt like an absolute horrible person when I was grabbing, yelling, and swearing in my 4-year-old's face. I felt like I didn't deserve anything after the realization of that kicked in for me. And I learned how to forgive myself for it, and how to move forward, and how to be a better person, and how to not do that again. And so forgiveness and acceptance is a massive, massive piece. And it takes time. Appreciate and understand that time is there for you, and these things don't change tomorrow. But before you realize it, if you keep dropping in little drops, just 1%, that's it. Just 1% a day. And you look back and go, oh, wow, I think I've come a long way. So that's it, man. I like the love piece. Yeah. I like to focus on love over negativity. And so sometimes it's hard to look in the mirror and say, I love you to yourself. That is a hard thing to do sometimes. If you're there, amazing. Just keep doing it. And if you're not there yet, then pick something else, a random thing. Doesn't matter what it is. Pick the leaf, pick the bird, pick the computer, pick the mouse, pick the headphones, pick the music, pick the song, pick something. And keep doing it.
And we'll end it there. Brandon, thank you so much. Thank you for your research. Thank you for your work. Thank you for caring. And looking forward to hearing more from you in the future, I'm sure.
Thanks, Conrad. I appreciate that. I'm receiving that, and I appreciate you, and thanks for having me on today.
Thanks, Brandon, for joining me today on the podcast, and thank you for the work you're doing. It's really amazing, the things you're reporting on, the things you're researching, and so I really enjoyed our conversation. And thank you for listening, and thank you for watching if you're watching on YouTube. And remember, you're not alone. If you need someone to talk to and don't know where you can turn, you can dial 988 for help. Until next time, be well, take care of yourself and those around you, and go out and do something great in the world.